Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Music Lab podcast. My name is Dogg, and I'm so excited to be back with all of you for another episode of the podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, our social media pages. That helps us. That helps the bands, artists, and anyone in the music industry. Also, check out our sponsor, RAR Outfitters. That's RAWR, outfitters.com. Don't just wear, RAR. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I have Mr. Tim Quirk. Welcome, Mr. Tim. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
All the way from Oakland, California. Been here in this house that you're at right now since 1997. When
Yes.
I say that, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
How did I get so fucking old?
Nice to not have a mortgage, though, right?
Well, literally, we own the house as of August 5th, I think, was when we paid it off.
I mean, that's an amazing feeling, right?
Yes, it is.
So, in the country of Scotland, I don't know if you know this, but if you see a house that has their door painted red, you know that that means they paid off their mortgage.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
And
kind
my
of.
dad's a member of the St. Andrews Society, so we're honorary Scots.
There you go. So when you go back to Scotland, you'll now know that fun
Okay.
tidbit. So we grew up in New York, right outside of New York City, born and raised. Talk about your childhood. How was, were you a normal kid? Were you a crazy kid? Did you get in trouble a lot? Were you a
I
studious kid?
was I was a rebellious kid who was very responsible about my irresponsibility. So I never really trusted authority, but I still got good grades. Before I took psychedelics for the first time, I researched them to figure out which one to take and what was going to happen. And it's actually how our band got its name. The guitar player and I, we'd formed this band mostly to play Clash songs at high school dances. And our new wave name at the time was The Rave, but we wanted to change it. And the first time he and I took mushrooms, we sort of set up my room. So there was guitars in one corner in case we wanted to write music. There was like crayons and markers in case we wanted to draw. There was all my records. And all we really did was listen to music for 8 hours and sort of bounce off the walls. But in the morning, I woke up, and I remembered writing something down. I was like, I wrote down something brilliant. I have to see what it was. And I picked up this yellow legal pad, and all that was on it was these swirly spirals and like triangular, like the triangular version of a spiral just going inwards all over this yellow legal paper. But in the middle, in teeny tiny handwriting, very, very small letters, were just the three words, "Too much joy." So I called up the band guys and I was like, I found our name. I found our name. I wrote it down last night.
So do
So,
you
but it was the 70s and it was the suburbs. So parents basically just, waved goodbye to you in the morning as you jumped on your bike and went off to have adventures and, didn't get worried as long as you were back for dinner.
do you remember in that 8 hours like an album or a song that really stuck with you?
Um, Geez. Well, let's see. I think the first record, the first LP I ever bought with my own money was Neil Diamond Gold, which I bought because it had all of his hits on it. I did not, yeah, I was like 7 or 8 years old. I didn't know what recorded live at the Troubadour in Los Angeles, California meant. So that was my first record. I was really in, until I was a teenager, my parents' taste was my taste. So they liked ABBA, they liked Neil Diamond, they liked The Who. So I liked all of those things, but I found that I liked ABBA and Neil Diamond better when I played them at 45 instead of at 33 and a third. So I didn't know it, but I was trying to invent punk pop. And then when I discovered the Clash, everything changed. And really, if you ask me like what's an important song from my youth, it would probably have to be either Clash City Rockers or White Band and Hammersmith Ballet. It's literally what made me want to be a musician.
So fast forward to today, like, are you concerned, like cool, or like super excited about like the pop punk scene today and like the bands that are coming out?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, of the punky bands like Against Me and Laura Jane Grace's solo stuff, I love. Titus Andronicus, I love. That's pretty much, anything that's just sort of I like I like people who are inspired by it without just, looking at it as a formula. So anything that's by the numbers doesn't really blow my skirt up.
Yeah, that's a fair statement, I think. So let's talk about you go to Stanford. Did you kind of have an idea when you went to Stanford what you were going to do, or was this kind of those 4 years that kind of allowed you to figure out it?
I was gonna be a writer. I was gonna be a novelist. That was the plan. And then I got out of Stanford in 3 years, and I didn't want to enter the real world, so I went to the MFA program in dramatic writing at NYU. And I figured if I had to make money, I could write screenplays as I was working on my artsy novels. But then the band and I got my first screenplay optioned, and I had an agent in Hollywood, but it was a literal like fork in the road, in my adult life when the band got a record deal, and I had to decide, okay, I mean, it was just with an indie label, but still I had to decide, am I gonna follow the music path or the writing path? And I was so deluded. I thought I was more likely to become successful as a screenwriter and support myself than I was as a punk pop musician. But then we got signed to Alias, and then Warner picked up the Alias record and re-released it and made another couple records for them. So I was wrong.
And what year was that when you first got signed?
Well, let's see. We self-released our first LP in '87.
Okay.
Alias Records in San Francisco signed us in '88. And then Warner picked us up in '89. So it's sort of boom, 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 one, two, three.
And I mean, just to give the audience an idea of, kind of the music landscape in 1988 and 1989, still hair metal is still around, right?
Oh
Even though
God,
it's
yeah.
kind of fallen, it was kind of starting to, fall off a little bit. Beginning of grunge, Chili Peppers, I think that was when they first started happening, so like there was a little bit of a dominant music scene that was not like the scene that you guys were getting, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were what was called back then a left of the dial band or a college
Sure.
radio band. And what happened was, when we got signed to Warner, we were sort of in the second wave. The first wave was REM, Husker Du, and Replacements. All got scooped up by Warner. And then we were in the wave that came after that. And it was, if you were successful on our side of the radio dial, that meant maybe selling 75,000 records. And no one expected you to go gold, let alone platinum. And then when Nirvana came along and broke everything wide open in 91, 92, then everything changed. And all of a sudden, just selling a couple 100,000 records as an alternative band on a major label was no longer acceptable. So when we failed to go platinum in the 90s, Warner eventually said goodbye.
It's always a numbers game, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
So do you feel like you had kind of peaked like creatively as a band during that time, or did you feel like you had more to give?
Oh, there was no, I mean, the records we've made, the records I have made with the original band and with a side project that's just Jay from Too Much Joy and myself, are far better than anything I was doing in the '80s or '90s. So it just, what was weird was, once you got signed, and there's all these expectations. I had this realization one day in the studio where we finished a mix and we were A-Bing it with what was on the radio at the time, which was probably Green Day, just to hear if like, it could compete on the radio. And I was watching the producer and the guys like flip back and forth. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is not why we got into this in the first place. Like there was never any goal of being on the radio. The goal was just to get the sounds in our head into the world, and that was it. And then anything that happened after that was gravy. And I wanted to get back to that. So eventually, the band never broke up. We just sort of slowed down. And then Jay and I formed the side project Wonderlick. And the one rule we came up with is that you can't say no to anything. Doesn't have to make the final mix, but if one of the band members has an idea he wants to try, you have to try it. And then you can argue about it afterwards, but you can't just shit on the idea before you even see what it sounds like. And that led to a whole bunch. It was basically just a different way of working. So I feel like we've gotten much better at what Too Much Troy was trying to do in the '80s and '90s in the 21st century.
Do you get the same excitement out of writing songs today as you did like in the 80s and 90s, or is it a different kind of excitement?
I get more excited now because they're better and I can recognize it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. It's so, it is a dichotomy actually because, you know, you would think logically that, yeah, as a musician, if you continue to play and you're in this, and your band members don't change, that you would think that each record you would put out would be better. But like, there are so many examples of bands where their debut album is their best album. Why do you think that is? Because in
Oh,
any
that's
other
easy because it's because by the time you put out your first record, you've been working for 5 to 10 years, right? So your first record is all your best songs, and then the follow up, the sophomore out. That's why it's called sophomore slump, or one of the reasons it's called sophomore slump is because usually within 12 to 18 months you put out another record, and but you've only got like 10 to 12 months, whereas before you had 10 to 12 years. So your later stuff is frequently not as good just because there's less time and it's more rushed.
Yeah, no, that's well said. So I guess like, do you think being in a band has helped you professionally, or do you feel like it's been a detriment at any point?
Oh no, it's absolutely helped me professionally, although I didn't, it took me a while to realize it. When I got my first straight job, I think I was 34, 35. In 1999, I got swept up in the dot-com boom here in the Bay Area. I went to work for a company called Listen.com. And the way my wife and I had set it up, when you're on a major label, you don't have a consistent income, but you get a lot of money in big chunks like every 18 months or so. And ours was mostly through our publishing deal with Virgin. So you'd get these like, giant checks, 5-figure checks for each member of the band. And I didn't have anything to spend it on. My wife and I had always lived very cheaply, so we just banked it. And our whole plan was when we had a child, which we wanted to do, neither of us was going to work for the first 5 years of the child's life. So we could both be home with the baby. I'd tour if there were shows going on, but that would maybe be, 4 to 6 weeks at a time. And so we did that. We were both full-time parents for the first 5 years of her life. And then when we were here in Oakland, when she turned 5 and it was time to go to kindergarten, we knew we were probably going to send her to private school. And I was also doing some freelance music journalism at the time. And I made enough that way that we figured we'd be okay and we could cover the tuition, but it was never a sure thing. So one of us was supposed to get a job. And the plan had always been for my wife to do it because I'd never had a straight job. Who the hell was going to hire me? But then the dot-com boom happened and companies like Listen.com needed funny music writers who knew everything there was to know about a particular genre of music. So I went and joined that company and I got promoted. I mean, partly because it was the dot-com, it was a crazy era. Like I got my first promotion 6 weeks later and my next one 2 months after that. And literally within a year, I was running the entire editorial department. But the reason for that was I'd been self-employed for the 15 years before that. And when you're self-employed, you're never not working. You're always hustling. So to me, when my wife kept trying to explain this to me the first year I was at work, she's like, Tim, you don't actually do 8 hours of work when you have an office job. You do like 2 hours of work and the rest of it is coffee breaks and cigarette breaks and bullshitting with your colleagues. I was like, oh, I didn't understand that. I just clocked in, did my work for 8 hours and went home. So I was doing 3 times as much as anyone around me. So yeah, I'm sorry, I forget what the question was, but did being a musician help me? So yeah,
Right.
so I sort of rose through the ranks pretty quickly, just because I was a hard worker and I was not a dummy, and so eventually, without even planning on it or even wanting it, before I knew it, I was an executive at a publicly traded technology company, in the mid-aughts, and I had massive imposter syndrome at the time because like I didn't have an MBA. There's all this jargon people were using all the time that I didn't understand. And I thought I was going to get called out, right? And so my first executive retreat, this is when I was working for Real Networks, which was the company that acquired Listen.com after we built Rhapsody. So there's like a day long of strategy sessions, sitting around in a boardroom. And then you all go out, like you bowl together, and then there's dinner, and then there's an open bar and drinks. So by the time we got to the open bar the first night, and I'd just been sitting there like sweating bullets all day long, thinking someone was going to figure out I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And then I realized at dinner, not everybody, but like by the end of the night, I had a crowd around me listening to because they all wanted to hear my stories of the touring days, right? I got a lot of good stories, so I can hold court if the occasion warrants. And I realized by the end of the night that while I thought I was missing something because these guys had been, gone to school and business school and, had planned to rise through the ranks and become executives. I had something they didn't, which was this sort of magic creative thing. And I realized they were all jealous and they wanted what I had. And I didn't want to have gone to business school. So from that night on, I was quite content and confident being a tech executive. So yeah, being a musician absolutely helped me because I didn't know it at the time, but the first time we went on tour, I was the sort of the receipt guy in the band, right? I filled out our tax returns and stuff. I wasn't a manager or anything, but I was the guy who gave a shit about money. Then the first time we went on tour, we didn't really know what we were doing, and we wound up stranded. We were in my mother's Dodge Caravan with all our gear. And this booking agent who'd booked us these shows, we hadn't realized that he was a cokehead and he was a liar. So we wound up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama with no shows and not enough money to get home. Luckily, I had one of us had our parents' credit card, so we were able to get home. And from that moment on, I was like, that is never happening again. So we never left home after that without knowing how much money we were going to make and how much money we needed to get to the next stop. So I was doing budgeting and projections and P&L scenarios, from the time I was a teenager without even realizing it. So basically, being a touring indie rock band in America in the 80s is better than business school.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. It really is. But like you said, you had some luck along the way. Like, give us an example where luck, really kind of played a part in your career.
All over the place. Our bass player just happened to meet the woman who became both our publicist and his wife, at CMJ one year. And she was like the publicist of the stars in the hip hop world. She represented Public Enemy and LL Cool J and um, Tone Loc, went back when Tone Loc was a thing, and she wanted to break into the rock world. So that was very fortuitous, and that wound up getting us. LL Cool J was in our music video when we covered "That's a Lie," a song of his. That all happened through that connection. So things like that were luck for sure. I would say, the fact that we got signed to Warner Brothers is as much luck as anything else. It depends who you ask, but I married my wife, the woman I married. I met her. She was running Alias Records when they put out our record. And she says that Danny Keaton, who was doing A&R at Chrysalis Records at the time, had called up and asking to hear another band on the label, the Sneetches. And she just, because she and I liked each other, she says she slipped the Too Much Joy record in. Now, Danny tells a different story. He says he read the Rolling Stone review of Son of Sam I Am and liked what it sounded like and called up Alias and asked for a copy of that. So maybe she misremembers and she actually slipped the other band's record in. But if she's telling the truth, that was definitely luck.
Do you and your wife have similar musical tastes, or are you totally opposite?
Oh no, we're very similar. I told her the only reason I knew I could marry her was because she not only knew who the Mekons were, but loved them as much as I did.
That's so funny. Yeah, I my number one band is Radiohead, and so my girlfriend, who I've been with now for 7 years, she was not like A, not much of a fan, A or B, didn't really know much anything of them. So
Ah,
now she's a true fan as well. So I'm proud
yeah.
of that. So let's talk about can we jump to Rhapsody then, or is there a
Yeah.
lot in between from college to Rhapsody?
No, there's just the band.
Okay. So yeah, so you did you join Rhapsody or did you start Rhapsody? How did this
I mean,
all
I was at the company as we decided to pivot from what we began life as. So listen.com, you have to remember in 1999, there was no Google.
Yeah.
Yahoo was the biggest search engine at the time. Uh, and there wasn't really there was a lot of online music, but by nobody you'd ever heard of. Because, and this is interesting, the reason I went to work for listen.com in the first place, I mentioned I was a music journalist. At that point in 99, I had a weekly column, a weekly music column online at a portal. It was like the San Francisco Chronicles web portal called
Nice.
SF Gate. And I was always looking for stuff to write about. I got this press release for a new startup called listen.com that came from a musician's PR firm, Girly Action. So I was on Girly Action's mailing list, and usually I got CDs, and this was the first time I got a pitch for a business. And I started reading it, and it was this brilliant press release. The headline was, in 1999, according to Yahoo's data, for the first time, the word sex was not the most searched for term in the world. In 1999, sex was deposed by MP3. And so MP3s had become the biggest thing that people were searching for, and the major labels refused to put any music online. So there was all this music online, but it was by nobodies. And it was on sites called like Ayuma and Riffage.com and GarageBand.com. And so Listen.com began life as there, it sounds ridiculous today, but at the time it was a compelling pitch. They wanted to be the Yahoo of online music. So the idea was because all this stuff was dispersed. Some of it was on individual band websites. Others, were at sites like Riffage and so on. But there was no single place that you could go and just enter a band name and hear whatever there was to hear. So the idea was Listen.com was going to point to every music wherever it was. And because nobody had ever heard of all this music, people were looking for the Rolling Stones and they'd get no results. So Listen.com had an editorial team. I joined originally as the soul and R&B music reviewer for Listen.com. And my job was literally just every day I had a queue of, unknown soul artists who were on various websites to review. Basically listen to the job was listen to the music, write up a 1 or 2 paragraph blurb about what it sounds like, assign them genres and assign them similar artists. So that if somebody came looking for Sly and the Family Stone, but we didn't have any Sly and the Family Stone, we could say, here's 23 bands that if you like Sly and the Family Stone, you're going to like them. So that was Listen.com's pitch.
You were the first Pandora.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
And so basically, the idea of a celestial jukebox was, getting. It wasn't a mainstream idea, but it wasn't, an unheard of idea by 1999. Lots of people saw that's where this was going. And so I became a convert, like, within a month of having started at Listen.com and getting immersed in this world. I was like, oh, absolutely. Music's going to stop being a product and it's going to become a service. And so we were all talking to each other about like, well, maybe we should do it. And there was one time when we realized the original plan of the web directory wasn't going to pan out and it was time to pivot. The CEO called a meeting of all his main people, and this was another another bit of luck. He'd been a fan of Too Much Joy, and he knew I was in Too Much Joy. I was just the soul and R&B music reviewer, right? But he called me into this meeting where we were discussing Listen.com's future because he wanted to hear my perspective, and he put me on a team and made me in charge of the team. We weren't investigating the Celestial Jukebox. We were investigating what if we pivoted to Look.com. So we had Listen.com and also Look.com. It was basically YouTube before YouTube, and so we had to do the business case for it. And someone else was looking at Celestial Jukebox, and someone else was looking at a B2B play. And then we had an offsite in Aptos, California. So basically, we had a month to put our presentations together, and then we had to go give our presentation. And my presentation was basically said like, "Oh yeah, Look.com, it's a good idea, but the time isn't right. What you need for this to take off isn't in place yet. We don't recommend pursuing this path. We like the Celestial Jukebox option these other guys are talking about." So basically, we ended up we acquired a company that had a really good technology, and they became part of the team, and we built Rhapsody. And the whole idea was, because we'd been doing all this musical categorization, we had a leg up on everybody else. Even though we hadn't built it for this purpose, we had this editorial infrastructure that could, link one thing to another. If you like this, you'll be interested in this, which is critical when you have a subscription service. Because if people don't find new things to listen to, they stop, they churn out, they stop paying you. So we basically built Rhapsody on the foundation that Listen.com had laid.
Yeah, and then so what was the initial response? Like what were the biggest like hiccups in the beginning? Like, talk about that.
Well, so the biggest hiccup, and this sounds funny today, but at the time, the biggest problem was there was a notion, because this was a new thing, it was a new way of experiencing music. And I knew it was going to be mainstream by the 2020s. That was obvious. The question was, how do you get from 2001 to 2025? And what we found was people had this inherent bias against quote unquote renting music. And so when people said, when we did market research and we found out why people churned out or why they didn't subscribe in the first place, they'd say, well, I want to own my music, not rent it. So we basically had to build in a music download feature that we knew was pointless. Like imagine Spotify, if you could download everything on Spotify. You would, but you'd quickly fill up your hard drive and the music's all there anyway, right? So you don't really need the physical file. So we knew it was pointless. But just to get people over the hump, we had to give them the ability to buy tracks. And the major labels they still weren't selling MP3s at the time. So we had to do this really convoluted thing where you would buy packs of burns, and you could buy a track and it would be in your digital library, but if you wanted to own it physically, you had to burn it to a CDR. And you could buy, a pack of 5 to 10 burns, and it was like buying a track for $1, basically. But of course, the labels wanted you to not just be able to buy one because they wanted to keep all the breakage. I was like, how do we pay you for something they haven't used? That doesn't make any sense to me. We should get the breakage. Uh, but that's not the way the music business works. Music business, it's always heads we win, tails you lose. So we had to build in this track download feature, knowing that nobody would use it. And I had to apologize to the engineers in advance because I was like, look, we're going to work really hard on this. It's a very complex technological problem. We're going to solve it, and then no one's going to use it. I want you to know that now. But it's still going to be worthwhile that we built it, because once we have it, more people will subscribe to our service and realize they don't need it. But they won't subscribe unless we have it in the first place. It was one of the weirdest things I ever had to do as a product guy.
Do you feel like, because as you and I both know, just from going to live, going to shows and just dealing with all of the bullshit that comes along with the music industry, do you feel like you're more jaded because you're an artist as well as, like, on the business side of it, like dealing with the music industry?
I mean, the answer is not really, or it's only in limited circumstances. So I'm very jaded about business stuff. I'm really jaded. Anytime someone says this is going to make musicians money, I'm like, no, it's not. It's going to make a bunch of middlemen money. Tell me what finally filters down to the musician, because I'm betting it's not going to be a lot. So I can be jaded about that piece of it. But, I was a music fan before I was a musician, and before I was a music businessman, and before I was a critic. So the fandom comes first. And when you're a fan, when you're a true music head, there's this evangelical aspect to it,
Sure.
where literally when I first heard REM, we saw them open for Gang of Four. They had nothing out but the original Hiptone single of Radio Free Europe, Back with Sitting Still. And they blew us away when they opened for Gang of Four. And my friend and I took Metro North into the city the next day to go to Bleecker Bob's to buy the single, which they were selling for $5. So this is 1980, a $5 single in 1980. That's like $25 today or something, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And my friend bought it. And I said, no, I'm not going to buy it. It's too much. And he looked at me and goes, Tim, I'm paying $5 for this. And one day I will laugh at you because I have this and you do not. And that it's true. 20 years later, he was laughing at me because he had it and I did not. But what he didn't know was going to happen was our band, Too Much Joy, would eventually sign with Propeller Records in the 2020s, which was founded by Jefferson Holt from the REM camp. And when he heard that story, when I told him that story before we played the first show he came to see of ours, he said, I'm going to send you a care package. And so a week later, I got not only the original Hiptone single for free without spending $5 or $25 for it, let alone $500 for it. I got a bunch of other very rare REM singles as well. So I beat Jay after all.
It's just another example of it's not what you know, it's who you know, right?
Yeah. So anyway, when I first fell in love with REM, they put out that, and then they put out the Chronic Town EP. I used to walk around with those 7 songs on a cassette, literally in this pocket, because I dress the same way now as I did when I was in high school. So I always had this pocket, always had the REM cassette in it, and anytime I was at a party, I would go over to the stereo. I'd turn off Molly Hatchet or whatever fucking Southern rock was playing. I'd put in my REM cassette. I'd push play because, as far as I was concerned, this is the best music in the world. It wasn't getting played on the radio, but all anyone had to do was hear it, and they would hear what I heard and fall in love with them. Well, what would always happen is it would play for no more than 2 minutes max before somebody screamed, "Take that shit out of the stereo! Put back on Molly Hatchet!" And then many years later, I went to see them at the Beacon in New York, the Beacon Theater. So it's like, what, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people, maybe. And I bumped into some of those kids who used to host the parties and yell at me to turn off the new wave music. And the thing that I'd wanted, for them to fall in love with REM, had finally happened, and they were there, and I was pissed. So I was like, you didn't get it originally. Fuck you.
I mean, let's talk. You just mentioned that venue, of course. There are the Fillmore in San Francisco. Obviously, is one of the most iconic. I'm sure you've seen shows there. Have you
Oh,
ever
God,
played
yeah.
there? And
Never played, no, never did the Fillmore.
okay, but talk about that experience going into it to see a show there at that Fillmore.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I went, so when I was going to school at Stanford, I'd see shows at the Fillmore a lot. Now that I live in San Francisco, I see shows at the Fillmore a lot. It's a great room with a great history and a great vibe. It's no longer Bill Graham Presents. When it was Bill Graham Presents, there was always like a big bowl of apples. It's on the second floor, so you have to walk up these stairs to get to it. When you get to the top of the stairs, there used to be a big bowl of apples for everybody. There's no more apples anymore. But apart from that, it's pretty much the same place. So I can't, I remember in the 80s seeing Husker Du and the Replacements there. Saw Wilco. Probably the first band I saw after we bought the house and moved out here was Wilco at the Fillmore. And I got to say, actually, so my wife and I had talked about moving west literally for a decade. And when we finally did it, uh, it took her a while to adjust. And so we got out here, I think, in April or May of '97. And a friend invited us to join her at the Fillmore to see Wilco in June or July, maybe it was July. So it had been like 6 to 8 weeks, and my wife was a little depressed. She hadn't, because it just wasn't as magical as she remembered. And she was wondering if we'd made a mistake moving across country with our 3-year-old daughter. And we went to the Fillmore show that night and saw Wilco, and it was such a great performance. Literally on the way home, she changed. And she was suddenly happy we'd moved to the Bay Area and everything was right with the world again because of a show at the Fillmore.
Was that after Yankee Hotel Foxtrot?
No, no, this was when they were touring on Being There.
Oh, I'm being there. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, a fantastic album too. Again, one of the best underrated bands I think in the country.
Yep.
Wilco. So okay, so then we're at Rhapsody for how long, and what makes us leave there to try and pursue something else?
So, like I said, in '99, I knew that music streaming was the future,
Hmm.
and I did everything in my power to usher that future in. So I stuck with Rhapsody till 2010. We went through various corporate permutations. It started out Rhapsody began life as a product that was built by the company called Listen.com. Listen.com and Rhapsody got acquired by Real Networks in 2003. Then it merged with MTV Networks' service called Urge. They'd had a competing subscription service at the time. And it became a joint venture with Viacom and MTV Networks for a few years. And then in 2010, it spun off as an independent company again. And at that point, I realized that while music streaming was absolutely the future, Rhapsody was not going to be a winner in that space. And Google had started making noise about getting into the space. So they basically recruited me. So I went over to Google. Originally to work on a music product, but that then transmogrified into Google Play. And we basically built Google Play while I was there. And my title there was head of global content programming, which sounds more impressive than it is. It basically meant I was managing all the product marketing managers who were responsible for what we push at people, all the digital content. So, figuring out what new releases are important in the music world, but also what movies in the video world, what books in the book world, and what apps and games in the app and game world. So I basically was with Rhapsody until 2010, then I went to Google because I thought Google had a better chance in this space.
So it was more about that. It wasn't about what Rhapsody wasn't doing, or was it more about what
No,
was
it
doing?
was just I mean, Rhapsody had made a play to at Real Networks. We were focused on the web product rather than the desktop app. And all the powerful functionality was in the desktop app. And that was a strategic decision that I was wary of at the time and did not pan out the way the people who advocated for it wanted it to. So it was really, as much as I love Rhapsody, and I'm as proud of Rhapsody as I am of any song I've ever written, any tour I've ever done, any album we've ever put out. We had a custom radio product that was better than Pandora. Like literally, anytime I do blind taste tests with us and them, we always came out ahead. Just because of that human, editorial layer, which Pandora had originally built their service on, and then they moved away from it and just went with collaborative filtering. Sorry, I forgot the original question. I got off on a tangent there.
No, you're fine. No, and I tried to give Pandora a chance, like at different points of
Yeah.
its existence, and it never did it for me. I don't know what it was. I don't know. It just never did it for me. So
I remember what the question was, why did I leave Rhapsody? So by
Sure.
2010, it was clear that just, we did not have the subscriber base. We'd lost the first mover advantage, and we no longer had the glowing press that we used to have. And it was all going to Spotify at that point, and Tidal was the one thing that looked like it might have a chance against Spotify. Uh, and so, it was clear that it was going to, if anybody was going to combat Spotify, it was probably going to be Amazon or Google. Or maybe Facebook, but they never got into the space in that way. So I went to Google, and then my role rapidly expanded and became in charge of all digital content types, not just music. So I spent the 4 years I was there learning as much as I could from the app and game developers, because part of my job was we called them QBRs, quarterly business reviews, with all our digital content partners. So the QBRs with the movie studios, with the book and magazine publishers, and with the record labels were always miserable affairs, right? Their businesses were cratering. They blamed Google. There was always fewer people on the other side of the table because they kept getting laid off, and they just were not fun experiences. Uh, and the QBRs with the app and game developers were fucking parties. They were making hundreds of millions of dollars through Google Play. They loved us. And so I spent the time I was there trying to figure it out. It's like they're all selling digital entertainment products. So what have app and game developers figured out that these other holdovers from the 20th century don't know yet? And I was arrogant enough to think I figured it out. So that's when I left and raised some seed capital to start my own thing, which was called Freeform, the fruits of which are now bearing fruit in Tapedeck.
So, I mean, what was it like working for Google? I mean, I can only imagine, like, it's the most powerful company in the world. Like,
So it was,
was
I
the
mean, at the
culture
time,
like? What was your upper management like? What was?
so it was, I mean, it was exciting in that, and when I joined in 2010, it was still, if you told people you worked at Google, they were impressed, and instead of throwing tomatoes at you. By the time I left in 2014, a lot of people on my editorial team had started lying to people about where they worked, because it was because everybody lived in San Francisco, and everyone in San Francisco was pissed at Google and Yahoo and Facebook and all the tech companies. But at the time when I first got there, it was thrilling because it was run by people just like me, right? Like literally, like you'd be in meetings with Larry or Sergey, and they'd be in shorts and flip-flops, just like they'd be dressed more casually than I was. So that part of it was great. And because they'd come from academia, they were like Stanford grad students when they came up with Google. Everything was arranged with, less like a business and more like an academy. So some of that was frustrating in that you couldn't, as a hiring manager, just say, I want that person on my team and offer them a job. They had to go through the Google interview process, which deliberately has people from outside of your own department interviewing them, as well as people in your department. Everybody has to agree on the candidate before an offer can be extended. And then this different committee, the compensation committee, decides what that offer is, and you have no influence over it whatsoever. So that aspect of stuff could be a bit frustrating, but it's also how they got the best people there. And the other thing that at first seemed too good to be true, because it was all the perks, right? Like, I mean, they just bury you in money. Not just your salary, but then the bonus, which might as well not be called a bonus because you always get it unless you're like not meeting expectations. It's just a question of how much more than your bonus will you get this year. And then the stock grants, which were, so crazily valuable. And then like on the campus, it's in Mountain View, California, so the weather's almost always perfect. You can do anything you need on campus. You can get your oil changed, you can get a haircut, you can bowl, you can do your laundry, you can get a massage. And anything that they don't have right on campus, there's a fleet of electric vehicles. You can just jump in one and run into Mountain View and do whatever errands you have to do in the middle of the day. And at first it seemed, and there's like, 24 gourmet cafes serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner for free, right? And so like you never have to eat the same thing twice. You just make a circuit of all the cafes over the course of a month. So basically I knew a guy, he was an engineer. He literally was living in his van in the parking lot because he had everything he needed at Google, including bathing. And he was just saving all his paychecks so that when, instead of ever renting, he could just go straight to putting a deposit on a house. And at first, I say it seems too good to be true because it is. All those things are there because they never want you to leave. They want you working Saturdays and Sundays. And because my team was housed within Android, we were always doing an Android release. We were never not in release mode, especially once we put out Google Play, because, there'd be like 10 more countries to turn on the books vertical in. And then as soon as you'd done that and all the books engineers got to rest, you had 15 countries to open the music vertical in. So my team never got a rest. And they literally they work you to death, they burn you out, they compensate you to make up for it. But most people, last about 3, maybe 4 years there. And the thing is, if you're an engineer, then you leave the high pressure environment of Google Play and you go like work on maps or something fun. But if you're a product marketing manager, there's nothing else for you to do at Google. So found your own company.
Is that what most people do then? Is like
Oh, yeah, well, no, I wouldn't say most people, but it's not uncommon.
yeah.
A colleague of mine made a joke that, yeah, the way you get promoted at Google, because there's also a promotion committee. So like I, as a manager, cannot say this is the best employee. I'm promoting them up a level. You have to make the case to the promotion committee, and they say yes or no. Um, if the promotion committee says no to you, his joke was, well, the way you get promoted at Google is you leave, you found your own company, and then they buy it and they bring you back 2 levels higher than you were when you left.
So, I mean, what is the temperature right now in Silicon Valley compared to like when you were there in 2010, 2015? Like,
Well, like I said, a lot of people will deny if they work at one of these big tech companies in the Bay Area now, just because it's so politically fraught. I mean, I don't mean politically in terms of,
yeah.
Trump and fascism and stuff. I just mean in terms of there's perceived to be a social cost to these companies, and so it's no longer a badge of honor to work for one of them. Um, but it's not as bad as, say, the mid teens, when people were regularly egging Google buses and Facebook buses as they drove around the Bay Area. And they'd literally like lie in front of them and threaten you, to say, "Go ahead, run me over," and then you'd be late for work and stuff like that. So the temperature is shifted, and honestly, billionaires are all acting like such fucking idiots these days. Like it should have turned against them, because Google's motto used to be "Don't be evil," but they capitulated to Trump. It's that stuff's infuriating.
Yeah, and once they do it, it's kind of a trickle down effect, which I
Yeah.
hate to use that term, but it is like that. It is, and you see that permeate then through the industry, right?
Yeah, but all these people like Musk and Zuckerberg, right? Like, I think they've given up on democracy. They have their billions. And they're like, oh, we don't want anyone telling us what we can and can't do with this. I want to run the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Greed and power, man. Greed and
Yeah.
power. So I want to get back to you. You had talked about when you were a writer that you did album reviews. For me, when I started this podcast 3 years ago, the majority of my content was album reviews because I enjoy listening to albums. I'm not just a song guy. I'm not a single guy, right? It's same as you. But as I did more and more of them, like I kind of grew to not enjoy it because, like, music is so subjective, and like, who am I to say, like, what that song means to me and, to an audience, like I can obviously have my opinions, but I should keep them to myself. So I've actually kind of stayed away now from doing album reviews. What's your take on that?
Well, so my take has changed over time. Back in the 20th century, album reviews served a very important purpose, sort of as a buyer's guide,
Sure.
because most records, you had to buy them in order to hear the songs that the radio wasn't already playing, to find out if they were any good or not. And so most people economized by just buying things that were on at the top of the charts, because they'd already been endorsed by the crowd, or by reading album reviews and deciding. Like, I bought the first Gang of Four record solely because the Rolling Stone review of it made it sound like something I would love, and also like something I'd never heard before. So that buyer's guide function of album reviews is no longer really necessary, because if you want to hear a new album, you just open up Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and you just hit play, or you go to YouTube. It's, the music is available for free everywhere. So now there's another purpose they've always served, which is just context. And that piece is still very important. So it's pretty interesting because, Rhapsody's main differentiator from other streaming services was its editorial piece. We had human curators. They weren't exactly, I told them, you're not curators, you're park rangers. Like you're bushwhacking trails through the musical jungle.
Yeah.
And so we had this, it developed over time, became over 50 pages, but we had this really thick editorial guidelines document that was really just a history of all the debates we'd ever had. But the main aspect of it that, like, if you want to work for Rhapsody and you want to be successful, you had to realize that we didn't hire you for your opinion, we hired you for your knowledge. And people who were paying us money to listen to whatever they wanted to, it was not our place to tell them what they wanted to, they were dumb for what they wanted to listen to. So there was a whole thing where we basically said, like, there's two fundamental rules for doing editorial at Rhapsody. Rule number one is you can never make fun of a fans of a particular artist or a particular genre of music, because they are not paying us to insult them. And number two is you have to always tell the truth. And a lot of music reviewers, especially if they were coming from the 20th century, thought those two things were opposed to each other.
Yeah.
But what I would just explain to them is the most important thing you have to tell people about this record is not, I think it's good, I think it's bad. The most important thing you have to tell people about this record is what it sounds like so they can decide if it's something they want to listen to or not. Or to give them context about what they're listening to as they're listening to it. So we basically had this set of guidelines that said, if you ever find yourself with nothing else to say about a particular artist or album except it sucks, I hate it, ask yourself, recognize that's a subjective opinion. What are the objective characteristics of the music that make me feel that way? Right. And so, you start looking for adjectives. Maybe you think it's overproduced. That's still a subjective opinion, but like now we've got something to work with, right? Maybe it's too slow for you. Like you like faster music. Again, you move from subjective opinion to objective facts, right? Like how produced is it? What are the tempos like? And you just start describing things as objectively as possible. Now, if you're a skilled writer, you can do that in a way that doesn't insult anybody, but lets people who are exactly like you know that, oh, this writer hates that thing, right? But it doesn't say you should hate it too. It just says, if you share my values, this is what you'll think of it. But if you don't share my values, you might love it. So you don't even have to type that piece out. It's just clear from the blurb itself. So that's the editorial approach we developed at Rhapsody, that I came to realize was just something like, I want to hand this primer. I literally called it a primer. I want to hand it to anybody who reviews music for a living, because what you think of it is less important than what you can tell us about it.
Yeah, that's true. So after then Google Play, you're there until 2015. Then what do we do?
So then I left Google and I raised a seed round from some angel investors. At this point in my career, I knew enough people who'd had enough success, who knew me and trusted me, that they'd write me a $10,000 or $20,000 check, and you get enough of those people and you got a business. So we raised about $2 million to basically. I had this idea at Google. I tried to make it happen at Google as a way of promoting Google Play Music. When we had a subscription service, YouTube ended up taking over that subscription service after I left. But at the time, what I want, I'd worked at Rhapsody, I worked at Google Play. I knew what our marketing departments paid for leads, through affiliate programs. And this is crazy. At Rhapsody, they don't do this anymore, but at the time, they were paying $15 for anyone who could get somebody into a free trial of the service, right? Now, $15 is more than the digital wholesale price of an album. So the concept was very easy to me. This is what I pitched internally at Google. I was like, let's find a major artist. I was friends with Lil Wayne's manager. At the time, the Carter 5 was coming up. And so I ran this idea by him and he loved it. I said, Lil Wayne's on board. Here's what we'll do. We will basically give away the Carter 5 to anybody who installs Google Play Music. They just get it. We send them MP3s. They get the album for free. Either way. We have to pay Lil Wayne, $10 for every time we do that. That is more than the $15 we are paying to get people to try into a free trial for this. So we're saving $5. Lil Wayne's selling more than he's ever sold before. He's happy. The fans are getting his music for free. They're happy. Everybody wins. It's genius, right? How could it fail? And my boss just kept saying, focus on your job, Tim. Focus on your job. I was like, but this is the future. future. So I got really frustrated. I left. I took Lil Wayne's album and his manager with me. His manager, or it wasn't his manager, it was the guy at his management company in charge of digital strategy. So he joined me as a co-founder of Freeform Development. And what we were doing was just taking all the lessons I'd learned from the free-to-play mobile game developers. So when I got to Google in 2010, before we built Play, there was just this thing called the Android Marketplace. Only sold apps and games, and emphasis on sold. There weren't really any free games at the time. When I got there in 2010, Rovio's Angry Birds was sort of the first example of a freemium product, and it was kind of a desperate experiment on their hands because they were selling it like gangbusters in the App Store on iOS. They could not get Android users to pay for the game. So they started experimenting with a free version, and before they knew it, they were making more money from the free version than they were from the paid version. And so within about 18 months, I watched the entire mobile gaming industry do a complete 180 on their business model. And by the time I left in 2014, 93% of the games were free in Google Play. And it had been like, 3% before.
All based on Angry Birds.
Yeah, all based on Angry Birds. And Candy Crush Saga was sort of like the Ebola virus of freemium. They were the ones that sort of perfected it, and they were literally making $1 billion a year. And here's what not a lot of people understood. They made $1 billion a year from 3% of their install base. Most people who installed that game never made an in-app purchase, but enough of people who did, 3% of if your install base is over 1 billion users and you get 3% of them to give you $1, you just made a lot of money. And so that was the model. And the thing is, because these companies were mostly run by engineers don't have religion about anything. Right? Everything's a 1 or a 0. It works or it doesn't. If it works, they figure out how to optimize it. If it doesn't work, they stop doing it. Music business never worked that way. And in 1999, 2000, the market spoke. They said, we want MP3s. Yeah. And the music business's response was to sue their fans for wanting the wrong thing, for wanting something they didn't want to sell them. It's literally insane. So basically, and I'll tell you one other anecdote, which is very illustrative. Google Play was so big, had over 1 billion users, that anytime we made a big UX change, we couldn't just flip a switch and boom, everybody gets the UX change. You have to roll it out very, very gradually. First to 1% of the users, make sure it's stable, then 2%. So whenever we did that, like within the first 48 hours, we'd start getting calls from our biggest developers because they weren't necessarily in the 1%. They didn't see any changes, but they saw something in their pipeline change for better or for worse. They knew something had changed at Google, and they called us up to find out what, because that's the level of insight they had into all of their funnels, right? And the music business had never worked that way. So they just call us up. They go, something changed. Tell me what changed. I have to know what changed. And then they, because the whole idea is if you can buy a user, through paid marketing campaigns, for less than that user will make you have a perpetual motion machine. And that's how you scale up apps and games. And I worked with so many brilliant developers while I was at Google. I just soaked up as much knowledge as I could from them. And this was something I had come to realize about my own career in the music business, where in the 20th century, if I saw my band's record for sale at Amoeba in a used bin for $9, I was happy, because I knew someone was way more likely to take a chance on me for $9 than they were for $18. And I wasn't going to get a penny of either sale either way. So it was all good to me. I just wanted them in my ecosystem so they'd come to a concert, maybe buy a t-shirt, and then maybe buy the next record and follow me. So I was living in the freemium world before I realized it. So it just made perfect sense to me that musicians needed to act more like mobile game developers. So the idea behind Freeform was easy. Your album is an app. It's not instead of putting it in Spotify or selling it in physical stores. It's in addition to. But once your album is an app, this is the way you will want all of your fans to get your album, because then they become your customer, not Spotify's customer, not Tower Records customer, not Apple's customer. They're yours. You live in their pocket. You can tell them when you have a new single out. You can sell them fan experiences. You can tell them when you're coming to their town. There's just 1,001 things you can do once you own the customer relationship. So step 1 was your album is an app. Step 2 is don't charge for the app. Give the app away for free. You will get a massive install base, and except from the outset, only 3% of whoever installs it is ever going to give you a penny. That's if you look at people's major stars like Taylor Swift and Justin Timberlake, if you look at their YouTube views and compare it to album sales, it's basically 3% of people who listen to stuff for free will end up paying for it. I said, but if you get a big enough install base like Candy Crush Saga, you can make $1 billion. So that was the pitch, and it was using the same idea I told you with Lil Wayne. Rhapsody was our hero offer. All you had to do to get this album for free was sign up for a free trial of Rhapsody. Cost you nothing. Made the artist $15, got you music for free, and made you the artist customer rather than Spotify's customer. So everybody was happy. And if you already had a free trial of Rhapsody or didn't feel like signing up for one, we had an offer wall with dozens of other offers, right? And so the whole idea is fans want music for free, but musicians need to get paid to make a living. It's an attention-based economy, so if you can just funnel the fans to sponsors who want the eyeballs and will pay more than the fans ever would have for those eyeballs, everybody gets what they want. So that was the concept. We made about 18 apps, 18 different artist apps for folks like Rob Thomas, Lil Wayne, Chris Brown, some others. And we were when we were running out of the $2 million that I'd raised, and it was time to either raise another round or find an exit. And that's when Zedge came calling. So we were in the like hundreds of thousands of installs, and we didn't pay per play. If you took all the revenue an app made and divided it by all the free plays it took to make those conversions in the first place, you were seeing effective per play rates between 5 cents and 13 cents across our apps. Okay. Depended on the app. Some were less successful than others, but they were all orders of magnitude more than Spotify's paying. So it was clear to me that as I scaled, this model would work. I just didn't have the money to scale it. So Zedge came calling. This was at the end of 2017. They really liked what I built. They liked the idea. So they basically acquired Freeform mostly as an acqui-hire, and then had me apply all the concepts I'd been applying to musicians to their existing user base, which was visual artists. So I've been doing what Freeform had done for musicians, for visual artists for the last 7 years. And the whole time I've been saying, let's expand it to musicians. Let's expand it to musicians. And finally this year I got the go ahead. So Tapedeck is our new app for the first 3 months. So through the end of 25, it's iOS only and US only. And that's basically just so I can have 3 months worth of data to do, reliable revenue projections, and also go to other labels and licensors and say, hey, look, this is how much we're making per play. The model works. You want to be in here.
Wow. So as an artist, do you think if you weren't an artist or a musician, like these ideas would have, do you think they still would have came to you, or do you think that being a musician directly involved like that aspect?
That's a good question. It's impossible to know the answer to. I like to think they would have come anyway,
Yeah.
But maybe not as fast, and maybe not with as much persuasive editorial around it when I try to convince other people of my point of view.
Yeah. So other than just the financial aspect of Spotify and all these like streaming sites with, obviously the negative aspect of it, what are the other major things other than financial that are, the biggest issue for bands with these streaming sites?
So the biggest one is philosophical to me, and it's a trade-off, right? So I'm not saying it's terrible. It's just different. When I was growing up, I had a deeper engagement with the music that I liked because I bought it. It was a physical thing, and it was just a ritual. I would lay down on the couch, put on the new LP that I bought, and read the line. Look at the cover, look at the back cover, read the credits, read the lyrics. I would consume it that way. So I knew the titles of all the songs. I knew the sequence on the album. When a band was playing one in concert, I remembered which album it was from and what its title was and where on the album it fell. Most of that's gone, right? We just don't engage as deeply. Even with the music we love, we don't have that same close relationship with it. And the thrill of discovery is, the crate digging, flipping through used stacks until you find, this out of print Bob Seger system record. things like that, I miss those, but again, I'm old. Like they've been replaced with ubiquity, which is inconvenience. And now all it costs you to listen to a new song is your time. So that makes people much more adventurous than they were. Personally, I think that's a reasonable trade-off. Having previous normies become more like music heads
Mhm.
is ultimately beneficial for musicians, even if their engagement with any individual piece of music isn't as deep as it might have been.
Yeah. So as as music as an art, it's obviously also a commodity. How do you balance that from the musician side and then also from the businessman side?
That's an excellent question that I have what I think is a pretty persuasive answer to. Now, what's interesting, this answer I'm going to give you, I have been saying this shit since, 2005.
Hell yeah.
And it's based on my own experience, both as a musician and as a music tech dude. Uh, However, and so I used to go to like, any gathering of musicians and give my spiel. It's called pushing people up the pyramid. And I'll give it to you in a moment. And I would get praised whenever I gave this spiel. People would come up to me afterwards and say, "This is so helpful. Thank you so much." Get reprinted, with very complimentary adjectives in various business publications. Then I go to work for Google. I give the same spiel at the same conference I've been going to for 10 years, and it gets covered as Google exec says give up on royalties or something like that, right? Which is not what I said at all. But it was just interesting. It's like once my title changed, the reception of my message changed, even though the message was the same as it had been for 10 years, right? People thought it was a evil Google executive trying to take money away from musicians when what I was really explaining was something different. Here's the spiel. Music, music is priceless, right? You cannot devalue music. It's impossible because music is literally priceless. Songs are not inherently worth $1. Albums are not inherently worth $10. Any song, even the latest Taylor Swift single, more people on planet Earth don't give a shit about it than do. So for all of those people, it is worth $0, right? Now, to some of our fans who will spend $20,000 to get an Eras ticket, it's worth a lot more than nothing. It's worth a lot more than $1, right? To them, it might be worth $10 or $100 or even $1,000. So the old music model in the 20th century, everybody paid the same price for the same thing, right? And that was reasonable in the 20th century when there was actual physical things you were buying. That no longer needs to be the case, and it shouldn't be the case. And so what's important, what I've been advocating to musicians and managers and labels, again, for decades now, is that while everybody should pay more than they are, and you shouldn't let up on Spotify, if you're expending all your energy complaining about how low Spotify royalties are, you're arguing in the wrong place because you could literally double them and it's not going to change things significantly. You could 10x them and it's barely going to change things. What you need to recognize is the question isn't how much am I getting paid at service A versus service B versus service C. The question is, what's my average revenue per fan? In these different channels. And the thing is, there's free channels like Spotify and YouTube and things like that. Your revenue per fan is going to be almost nothing. It's going to be as close to zero as the market will bear. And you can get pissed about that fact and say, it didn't used to be like that, and I hate that it's like that now. Or you can accept that fact. And I think you're better served accepting that fact and saying instead of, why don't they pay me more? Say, okay, how do I embrace the good of these channels, which is I'm getting lots more listeners than I ever would have had before. All these people, they only could have listened to me if they bought my record previously, and almost none of these people ever would have done that anyway. So this is all gravy to me. This is all good. These are new potential fans. How do I get them off of YouTube and Spotify and into a channel that's where my average revenue per user is going to be more? Ultimately, you want that to be your own channel. You want them to be paying you directly for your stuff, right? But again, I call it pushing people up the pyramid because anytime you're an artist, you have a new song out, the first thing you want is as many people as possible to hear it. That's the free level. So you want to get on the radio. Used to want to get on MTV. You want to be on Fallon and Kimmel and all that stuff. You want as many people to hear your stuff for free as possible, right? And then the next level up the pyramid, you want as large a subset of all those free listeners as possible to give you a little bit of money for your music. Maybe that's streaming it, on a paid service. Maybe it's buying the single. And then you want the highest possible subset of them to give you even more money. Maybe that's buying the album or a concert ticket. And you want the highest. So basically, each level, there's fewer people, but there's more money per person. And so in a healthy musician will have people at every level, and they're not pissed that the most people are at the Spotify level and they're only getting a third of a penny per play, because they figured out how to get as many people as possible from that level to the second level, and from that level to the third, and from the third to the fourth, and at the tippy top. And the thing is, Kiss was doing this in the 70s and 80s, right? They were the masters of this. You could get buried in a Kiss coffin. You can have a Kiss condom that breaks, and then you have a child and you put in a Kiss onesie. Right? There's like Kiss everything. They realized they were a brand, not just musicians. And they took it to extremes that like are embarrassing. But they were doing this. They sort of showed the way. At the tippy top of their pyramid are people who want to get buried in the Kiss coffin and will pay $5,000 for that privilege. So that's my spiel. That's what I say to artists. That's what I do as an artist. Too Much Joy now, when I said we signed to Propeller Records, we signed an amazing deal where I basically told them, look, I already have the email address of everybody who's going to buy this record, and I've already sold it to all of them. They gave me the money for it before it existed. That's how I got the money to fund its creation in the first place. So I've already reached all of them. I'm already recouped. So you don't have to give me any money for this record. But you do have to give me 50% of any profits, not counting the ones I've already sold. So it's your job to go find new fans. Amazing deal for me, right? So that's the way we work now. We do fan funding of albums before they exist. We set up perks at different levels. So if you just want the digital album, $10. Boom, it's yours when it exists. If you want the CD, $15. If you want your name in the liner notes, $25. If you want a song written about you, $1,000, right? And then there's t-shirts and hoodies and things in between. And it's interesting, like with Bandcamp, the price you set is a floor, not a ceiling, because they give fans the ability to pay more. Every Too Much Joy fan pays more than the $10 we ask for on Bandcamp. Nobody pays less because they can't, but our average sales price is like $12.75. It's nice. It's a nice little, bonus on top of it. Now, most people on planet Earth, I would have to pay them to listen to my music. Right. But these people, my super fans, they want to pay me more than I'm asking them. So it's important to create digitally platforms and tools where people can do those things. And Tapedeck is one entry in that phenomenon.
And I guess too, like, TikTok and social media has changed the landscape of music so much. I mean, you're getting now artists that are on TikTok now doing arena tours.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, like, the whole model is upside down. Like, speak on that, as a businessman as well as a musician yourself.
Well, I will. I'm officially too old to opine helpfully on TikTok because I don't understand it. Jay, my partner in the side project Wonderlick, he every once in a while tries to promote us on TikTok, and it's very embarrassing. It doesn't work because we don't know how to do it. So I would not pretend to have anything helpful to say on that beyond the fact that it's fucking weird, man. It's exciting. It's any again. It's just that's the most powerful example of that free tier that I'm talking about, where people are getting turned on to. They don't even have to be new songs. They can be old songs that are just new to the youngsters that are getting turned on to them by TikTok. And I take it for granted there's already something else out there that all the people who think TikTok users are old are using for themselves because it's going to be their thing. Remember MySpace before Facebook? MySpace was the place to be.
Yeah.
What the fuck is MySpace? Nobody even remembers it anymore. So that's going to happen to every platform.
Yeah, and for music too. I mean, MySpace was big for music.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really kind of just quickly went away. So
Yep.
I want to know one of my last questions for you. I want to know, as a musician, how do you what is the best way for you to listen to music? Are you a headphones guy? Are you in the car? Are you in your living room with some nice speakers? Like what's your ideal way to listen to music?
Yes. I am all of those things. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm an extreme case, but if I'm not watching a movie or a television show, uh, or on a Zoom call, music is playing. So during my workday, when I'm sitting here staring into this screen that I'm staring at right now, I've got, some nice little clip speakers with a subwoofer, and I'm listening to music that way. At the end of my day, my working day, I retire to my living room where I have a really nice stereo and an Eames chair that I lay in, and the speakers are perfectly positioned for Tim in his Eames chair, basically. Our living room layout is very weird, so there's no way to set it up so everybody gets the best sound. There's only a way to set it up so one person gets the best sound. So I'll listen to music there for 2 to 5 hours. And if I'm driving, music is playing. If I'm on a plane, I got headphones in and music is playing. If I'm on the treadmill, headphones are in and music is playing. Out of all of those things, my favorite way to experience it is live in a club with the band playing it in my face.
So that's a good question. So you always hear like Hollywood actors and actresses like say like, "Oh, it's so hard for me to either A, watch myself or like just watch movies in general because I'm so like critiqueful." I don't get that though from musicians. Like, why do you think that is? Like, musicians can go see shows and like there's, like yeah, I'm seeing live music. Why do you think that is that there's not that like what actors and actresses kind of deal with?
Well, I don't know. I can be a jealous bastard about other musicians. Certainly more so when I was a kid. I mean, I remember when Smells Like Teen Spirit broke, it was at the same time that we had a new single out. And we'd be pulling into a town and we'd put on, and there's one commercial alternative station. We'd put on the commercial alternative station hoping to hear our single, and we'd hear fucking Smells Like Teen Spirit 10 times before we even heard ours once, right? And that was infuriating. And it took me years to appreciate Nevermind as an album just because I couldn't see it through all the jealousy. Similar thing with Camper Van Beethoven. In the 80s, they were a very similar, quirky, slightly funny alternative college band, basically hoeing the same row as us. So I hated them. Not musically. I couldn't listen to them because they were my competition. I've gotten over most of that as I've aged, but not all of it. So I wouldn't I question your premise. I think there's a lot of jealous musicians.
I'll take that. So I guess my final question then for you, like, of all of the, of all of your accomplishments, of all of the things that you've done professionally and, musically, like, where do you rank Tape Deck and where do you think Tape Deck can go?
Well, so where Tape Deck can go, I can't guarantee it's going to go there, but I would be very happy. So part of this is, I would say, penance. In the aughts, I was such an evangelist for the streaming model, and I was showing people charts of like when Rhapsody gets to 100 million subscribers, this is what your revenue is going to look like. Now, granted, we were paying a penny per play, which is not the path that Spotify took. But I was so Pollyannish about the future in a way. And, think about it. I was in a cult band, and streaming services promise to pay bands for not based on how many people like you, but based on how much they like you. And since the average Too Much Joy fan likes Too Much Joy even more than the average Taylor Swift fan likes Taylor Swift, I figured that was going to be good news for me and my brethren. I did not anticipate that companies like Spotify would, let alone could, say things like, "Oh, we're just going to choose not to pay you for the first 1,000 streams of any individual track." That seems like it should be illegal. So, like, how we got here, I don't quite understand. So where I want Tape Deck to go, where I'm going to do everything in my power to make Tape Deck to go, is get to a place where everybody else has to match us to compete. We're not trying to have a Spotify-like catalog from the beginning. We're not marketing this to casual music fans. We're marketing this to music heads who know that musicians are struggling and proactively want to ensure they're paid a living wage. So that's a small base to start from. But from there, once we can demonstrate that there's another way, there's a better way of paying artists, I want to change the fucking business. I want everybody to have to match us. So that's where I want this to go. And this is, I'm 60. This is the last major product launch I plan to be involved in myself. Never say never. Who knows what will change? But I would very much hope that this is my swan song, and I can retire proudly. That's my desire.
Yeah, I mean, like when you think about just the idea of retirement, does it excite you? Does it scare you? Are
Oh,
you?
it excites me because then I could listen to music every waking hour of the day.
I kind of figured that was your answer, but I wasn't sure. You seem like a just a natural hard worker, and so I wasn't
Oh,
sure.
listening closely is hard work. It's just fun work.
So, what was the best show that you've seen this year then?
Ooh, that's a good question because I've seen a lot of really, really good shows.
Oh,
I might
top
have
three
to
then.
say
That's fine.
I might no, I might have to say Big Thief at the Greek
Nice.
um just last month because at one point I was literally tears were just pouring down my face. It was so transcendently beautifully great. But the Mekons at Great American Music Hall was also pretty good. So those are two wild ends of different spectrums.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, would you say then between San Francisco and LA, would LA have better music venues, or would you say San Francisco does?
Well, I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so I have to say San Francisco, just because
Yeah.
it's more. But I mean, I don't know if that's the venues themselves or just the fact of getting from my house to the venue is such a more pleasant experience than anywhere going to any venue in LA, even like the Hollywood Bowl. Like Hollywood Bowl is great. Man, it's a pain in the ass to get there.
Is it really? Okay. Yeah, I can only imagine. We are going to be there actually in a couple weeks. We're flying out to LA. We will be there for November 1st for like 28 hours, and then we're getting on a cruise in Long Beach and going down to Mexico.
Hmm.
So I was hoping to see a show in LA like on that Saturday night. That's like the first, but really wasn't much going on. I was a little surprised. There's
Oh,
a
bummer.
Yeah, the Deftones are doing their festival, I guess. The Dia de los Muertos or whatever. So that might be fun, but I don't know if I can convince my girlfriend to go see the Deftones. Although we did see Nine Inch Nails and she did love them.
All right.
Well, hey Tim, I thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this was a fascinating conversation. I hope our audience appreciates all the knowledge and just the stories and just your accomplishments. So
Thanks, man.
well done, my friend. Well
All
done.
right. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, check out Tape Deck. It is available, like you said, for iOS users now till the end of the
Yes.
year, correct?
Yeah, we will be expanding to Android and web at some point in 2026, but starting on iOS only.
That's exciting. Well, best of luck to you, my friend. And
Thank you.
and you said that the band is going to have you're releasing a new album then?
Son of Sam I Am, Tommy's version comes out on Halloween.
Okay. And best way to get information about the
Install.
band?
Uh, oh, I was going to say best way to get the album is to install Tape Deck and pre-order it.
Yeah.
You can get it for free, basically, and I will get more money than if you paid for it elsewhere.
Uh,
Uh, I'm sorry. What was what's
how
the
to yeah, how do
Oh,
fans find out about the band? Yeah, yeah.
follow us on Facebook. We have a website, but we never update it. We always update the Facebook page.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well, again, thank you so much for doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, our social media pages. That helps us. That helps the bands, artists, and entrepreneurs like Mr. Tim. Also, check out our sponsor, RAR Outfitters. That's RAWR, outfitters.com. Don't just wear, RAR. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I've been Dog. You've been great. This is the Music Lab Podcast.